Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we are doing a refresh on this CH13 that we're swapping into the Raider 10. And the engine ran okay, it needed carb work, but since we had it out, we're going to go through what we normally would do on any engine when we have it out of the frame. So it's a ton of cleaning basically, and then replacing some seals and taking care of some small stuff. So we've got the shrouds all cleaned up. There was a bunch of goo laying down on the bottom here from a leaky crank seal. The single cylinder commands are pretty simple as far as the tin work goes. It's one of the things that makes them kind of enjoyable to work on, is there's just less stuff than a twin. So we cleaned up all of the shrouds, took off the stator, cleaned it up real nice, put in a front crank seal here. You can see those are the old seals there. They weren't too bad, but you know, while it's out, we might as well. This just makes everything so much more enjoyable once it's all put together. It kind of puts a little bit of a hiccup in the process, but to be honest, this is, if you've watched any of our other videos or revival series, this is something that we really enjoy doing anyway. So the engine works really awesome. I love it. I think it's so much fun. So never really gets old. Valves, got the exhaust valve here, maybe. Lap that in. No real deep pitting or anything like that. It turned out pretty nice, and the seat cleaned up really well too. I'm just gotta wipe that off a little bit. Intake needed less work, as it usually does. Looking pretty good. And you can see the seat's in good shape. The guides are in amazing shape. There's barely any wear at all. I do think this is a low hour engine. We went through the carb completely. Excuse my sloppy nail polish there. Don't ever ask me to take care of your nails. I'm not gonna do so well with that, it looks like. That was where a Welch plug was, so he pulled the Welch plug out and then sealed around the edge of it. Took it apart and completely cleaned it, and put a new float needle valve in, put a new bowl gasket in, cleaned out all the jets and stuff. This guy basically had water in it. I don't know how this engine was running as well as it was. There was tons of water in the fuel, and it never really got out of it. So took care of that. We took this fuel tube here out because it was really rusty inside, and we put that in the ultrasonic tank to get the rust out of the tube itself. And speaking of rust, when we pulled the flywheel off, these magnets here were pretty loose. One of them just popped up. I usually pull my finger up underneath them just to see if they can pop out of there, and if they move at all, then we just glue them all back together. This one was super rusty, and basically all of them were just you could grab them with your finger and just pop them out. So took the magnets out and glued them back in there, so that's all good to go. And now we're ready to reassemble that side of it. The surfaces have been cleaned up. The threads have been chased and cleaned. The bore of this engine looks great. I don't know how well camera's going to pick this up, but that crosshatch is pretty phenomenal. There's very little wear. Yeah, I don't think it's going to pick it up very well. There you go, you can kind of see it a little better now. Yeah, it looks great, and you know, there's barely any ridge. I don't think this engine's going to consume very much oil at all. We're doing a head gasket. Cleaned up that surface there. That's all good. I actually put the head in the ultrasonic tank too to get as much of the goo out of it as possible. We've got some new valve stem seals going in. This single cylinder spec for Cub shows that we use valve stem seals on both valves. I did a John Deere earlier this year that was a vertical shaft that had absolutely no valve stem seal on either. So I don't know why they would spec it like that, but the Cub spec is for us to use valve stems on both. Intake adapters all cleaned up. New gaskets here. 1, 2, 3, and then there's more gaskets as the carburetor goes on. Head bolts all cleaned up. A light amount of lubrication on the threads, and I've run them down through each hole just to make sure each hole is nice and smooth. On the aluminum, I try to be pretty careful not to chase them with a cutting tap anymore. I used to, but I'd rather they be a little bit dirty and still have more material. A thread chaser is what you should be using here instead of a tap. I don't have a chaser in that size though. One of the bolts gets, excuse my oily fingers, one of the bolts gets thread sealant, which would be that one there. I'm not quite sure why they do that on that one. It still doesn't make sense to me. I know that it's open to the environment here because those threads come down like that. I don't know. I'm just going to follow directions. We've got the Kohler spec directions here, but I've done enough of these to kind of know by memory most of this stuff. This is just a kit that I had laying around. So yeah, crank seal's done on this side. Crank seal is done on the other side. And chasing the oil leaks, we fixed this drain they had in here. So this is not a Cub drain, and this is not the drain that they had. The drain that they had in there is this guy. Oops, sorry. And there's nothing really wrong with it, but they never sealed it really well, and so it was just leaking everywhere. Basically, the whole bottom of the engine was covered in oil, and then as the blower fan would move, I guess it moves clockwise, it would spin oil up into the rest of the case. So replaced this with that guy, which is a nice valve with an outlet over here. So we'll just hook a tube up to that, make oil changes nice and easy. And then further oil leak fixing. Very common on the single cylinder commands is for a leak to occur here at the fuel pump, and the previous owner of this machine's that this engine was in had installed a new fuel pump, and they installed it wrong. They had 2 gaskets. They basically had a sandwich of gaskets in there. They had the original gasket that was still stuck to the block, and then they had another gasket behind it, and then the O-ring that seats into the bore of the fuel pump. So the pump wasn't stroking enough because it was basically shimmed out from the cam, and it was leaking. So we fixed that. I know I don't like to have silicone on O-rings. I don't typically do that, but on this application, I want to seal the flange as well. So I just put a little bit of Honda Bond in there. That stuff's just amazing. And now we are ready to start putting it back together. So, I wanted to show you what we do on a Kohler, or basically any air-cooled outdoor power engine when we have it out. This just makes it so much more enjoyable and so much more reliable once you get in there. And honestly, you never know what you're going to find. I mean, these guys here were kind of a ticking time bomb. Didn't know about that. Carb definitely needed done. The exhaust valve was leaking. I could see light through the exhaust port and into the valve. It was leaking. The crank seal leaking a little bit on this side. Not terrible, but still, it was leaking. Yeah, I mean, we could have just thrown the engine in there and just gone with it, but now we'll be proud of what we have, and it will be very enjoyable. So we're going to put it back together and then chuck it back in the frame and start working on some of the wiring. Show you kind of where we're at here. latched. Careful, the hood's not bolted on, it's just kind of sitting there. So, fuel tank is now removed, and as you can see, the dash panel is also removed. We're going to be replacing all the wiring in here and fixing that dash panel next. But first we got to get the engine back in there so we can start hooking up all of the fuel and the controls and all that kind of good stuff. So, and I think we found a plow, so I think we're going to pick that up this week. So we'll be taking the deck off soon, but not immediately. And one last note on the Revival itself, not related to anything on the engine or anything else. This is not right. I didn't know this. First wheel horse I've owned. There's supposed to be a little roller right here that spaces this out like that. And that explains why my deck tension was always all the way out to the edge right here. So, found a new old stock, one of these little rollers that's supposed to go in here. You can see I got a little snap ring and a washer. I mean, that's just what I had laying around so the thing would stay in there. So that's coming, and then we'll mow the lawn with it. We'll try it. What I'd like to do is put that engine under a good heavy load, so I'm going to keep the deck on there for now. I want to test the drive system and the PTO system and everything with this engine before we take the deck out. So, yeah, stay tuned. We're going to get this guy back in the frame and start working on some wiring and controls. And then we'll go from there. Thanks for watching, everyone.